Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting tonight's show. Up first on the breakup map here, as you can see, a lot of blue here on all of the interior rivers here, which means up here in the legend, open. Up to the north, North Slope River's getting some open areas here on the, I believe that's the Sag River. Kaparik River has a little bit of open areas at the headwaters there. And then the Colville River right here, kind of quite a stretch there with some open water. And as of now, there are no warnings out or flood advisories or anything like that or watches. And it's over here south of the Brooks Range, just waiting for those rivers to finish off. And moving on to satellite imagery, starting out, a pretty good day. Starting here over much of the central western interior areas, but showers, clouds building throughout the day, triggered by the heating of the sun now over the interior here, with some thunderstorm activity from the northern Kuskokwim Valley around McGrath extending up along this area, clouds back to the northeast there. Otherwise, Bristol Bay looking pretty good. Looked like trying to clear out there at Kodiak Island. Definitely a little bit drier, although some moisture earlier on. They picked about 0.17 of an inch since midnight, and that fell earlier. Looks like it's pretty well ended now. Back out here to the west, clouds, isolated showers, really just mostly clouds here. Were some showers isolated along the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, and high pressure building over the central Bering Sea ahead of the next system. That brought some breezes up here from the southwest coast on down across the peninsula with False Pass gusts to 41 miles per hour. Today, and then both Hooper and Tuksuk Bays had gusts out of the northwest to about 35 miles an hour. Otherwise, up on the Arctic coast, clouds continued there. There have been some flurries here on the east side, but generally still breezy with winds of 20 to 30 miles per hour out of the east along the entire Arctic coast. Lots of clouds here over the northern Bering Sea. And warm front bringing some moisture into the far western Aleutians. Otherwise, off the southeast coast here, big storm there moving northward. Front right through here, moving in this afternoon, late in the afternoon, with rainfall amounts over an inch at Ketchikan, and lighter amounts up to the north starting later there. Juneau picked about 0.17 of an inch, but winds gusts as high as 46 miles per hour at Heidelberg. And Juneau at the airport had gusts of 35 miles per hour, so pretty good system rolling in to the panhandle with the gale force winds. Clouds, Yakutat, no precipitation yet, kind of break up. Maybe some clearing there over the Copper River Basin and back over areas of south central Alaska, along with some developing showers here. And then the thunderstorms isolated to widely scattered there from the eastern interior and then back around into the northern Kuskokwim Valley, basically dry with some sunshine out here in the west up to the north, showers over the central Brooks Range, and then the lines a little closer together here supporting those northwest winds, again gusting 40 miles an hour or more here along portions of the Alaska Peninsula. But lighter winds, rain, fog, and drizzle. Fog looked pretty widespread here, or clouds with some fog over the northern Bering Sea. And then ahead of that warm front, some rain pushing into the Shimia area. And for tonight, that will weaken and lift northward, leaving a few showers behind there. And the next one just coming onto the chart there down to the south, but looks pretty good here, especially wind-wise. Be pretty light on the winds for central Aleutians in across just about all of the central and eastern Bering Sea. Winds diminishing here for the southwest coast, as well as the Alaska Peninsula, becoming a little more west-northwesterly, but a lot of low clouds, fog, a lot of moisture caught up in this going through the ridge here, coming up from the southwest, really not cutting off or developing a high center. So it's just going to be a lot of lower flying conditions, marginal VFR and IFR out there. Evening thunderstorms dissipate here this evening over the interior, and as well as the showers across south central Alaska. Scattered showers in the Brooks Range, otherwise dry across the interior with light winds. Low pressure weakening now off the southeast coast, but staying pretty breezy, especially on the north coast there. But when the front pushes in, winds will come down. Rain will taper off and become more showery over the southern areas, but it looks pretty wet, especially this evening over the northern southeast coast. And taking a look now at the forecast for Sunday. Front pushes on, still have a low here in the Gulf of Alaska. Another portion develops, moves up into the Yukon there, about 1,002 millibars. That'll keep it showery over the Copper River Basin. Showers, a couple of troughs will swing into the Panhandle there, at least one. This one obviously taking off to the Queen Charlotte's, but it'll be a drier, less windy day for sure tomorrow for the southeast coast, with showers possibly even diminishing in the afternoon there, with sunshine, partly to mostly there for Kodiak Island. Northwest winds maybe 15, could see gusts 25, especially back here over the over toward Chignik and northeast Bristol Bay. But light winds, partly to mostly sunny for the southwest interior here, and maybe a few breaks even along the coast, but I wouldn't count on too much. Northeast interior from, say the central Tanana Valley, greater Fairbanks area, on up to the Brooks Range, partly to mostly sunny. Showers mostly to the south here. And then very weak trough here, could kick off a little bit of moisture, but nothing significant at all up here over the northwest. And the next system, couple of low centers, front pushing eastward, and possible gale force winds and narrow band ahead of that front, but definitely a lot of moisture coming with this. So I'll spread rain eastward to Atka late in the afternoon. And then the winds, of course, in the front pushes by, will diminish there out towards Shimia. And taking a look for the Memorial Day holiday, Monday, that front pushes eastward here. Starts to weaken, but still a lot of moisture with that. Main low center tracking northward here out of the far western Bering Sea. They'll spin a couple of troughs, kick the shower activity up in the winds there over the western Aleutians, but wet, windy day coming up for St. Paul, St. George, down across Unalaska Island to Nikolsky, although breaking out to the west there, winds will turn west, maybe probably see some clearing behind the front, but rain on the increase spreading eastward across the Alaska Peninsula, and not quite reaching the southwest coast until possibly Monday evening. So looking pretty good here. Kodiak Island again, although southwest flow should keep it dry with maybe some sunshine throughout much of the day. You may see an increase in the higher clouds late in the day. Thunderstorms, best chance right through here, Kenai Peninsula, western Alaska Range, possibly the Talkeetna Mountains, and back up to the west, just isolated. Otherwise showers, a lot more isolated now. Best chance Copper River Basin over the mountainous terrain, but dry eastern Tanana Valley. Up to the north, back to the west, just some isolated showers here, a thermal trough in that area. Low clouds and fog increasing here along the Arctic coast and the Chukchi Sea areas. Otherwise, this low weakening, just drifting eastward here off the Panhandle up to 1,014 millibars. But still enough moisture with that. A couple of troughs spinning in, bringing some areas of rain or showers here, mostly over the central and southern areas. A little drier to the north there, but still looks unsettled there for the southeast coast even through Monday. And taking a look at the low temperatures for tomorrow morning. Mid-40s here to upper 40s south for the Panhandle, and lower 40s there for the North Gulf Coast. Mid-40s, Cook Inlet, Susitna, Matanuska Valleys to Kodiak Island, and upper 30s here, Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, and Pribilofs, near 40 over the Aleutians, and lower 40s here over the west central interior, maybe dropping a shade below 40, central and upper Tanana Valley to mid-30s, 20s north slope, lower 20s in the Arctic coast, and right around freezing here along the northwest coastal areas. Highs for tomorrow afternoon, mid-60s for the Susitna Valley, looking pretty good there with near 60 over the central interior areas, and then highs in the lower 50s here for the Panhandle, mid to upper 20s, northern north slope and the Arctic coast, 50 for the Brooks Range, 30s over the northwest, and looks like upper 40s here for the central Aleutians, and mid to upper 40s, Alaska Peninsula, upper 50s, northeast Bristol Bay in that area. Otherwise, lower to mid 30s here for the Bering Strait and across the western northern Seward Peninsula. And for the lows on Monday morning, lower 20s again for the Arctic coast, and then lower 30s toward the Brooks Range. Betelgeuse low about 40, 30s to 40s here, probably mid 30s here, eastern interior, and back down to the mid 30s you head out toward the Bering Sea coast. And lower 40s for the Aleutians. Panhandle, not much change in those overnight lows with mid to upper 40s. Otherwise, about the same here for south central Alaska to Kodiak Island. And for the highs in the afternoon Monday, lower 60s here, central interior, and lower 60s for the Susitna Valley. Otherwise, 50s for the southeast coast. Kodiak Island, lower 50s, might be a little bit warmer, but mid 50s for Bristol Bay, mid 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, and the Aleutians in the lower 40s, especially out to the west.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Several areas of IFR here on the chart for tomorrow morning, Sunday morning. Western Seward Peninsula, right on down across the Yukon Delta, and then some banding out here over the eastern Bering Sea. More widespread with that next system coming in. IFR more widespread out west and moving eastward. And just off the Arctic coast along the Brooks Range. For the afternoon tomorrow, marginal VFR, mainly affecting Nunivak Island, the Pribilofs, otherwise VFR here. For Fox Islands over to about Atka with the lower stuff spreading eastward with that next storm. You see a huge area IFR out there. Smaller area here south of St. Lawrence Island, and IFR persisting there on the west and southwest part of the Seward Peninsula. Good VFR in the interior here. Some isolated thunderstorms, and the Brooks Range, marginal, but the North Slope areas of it becoming VFR. Marginal VFR mostly for the southeast coast. And then the following morning on Monday, we've got over the Wrangell Mountains, east part of the Copper River Basin Zone, IFR. Areas IFR, especially over toward the border and to the north here of the Panhandle. Lots of IFR up north there from the north of the Brooks Range, and also here along the and off the coast down to the Alaska Peninsula, up along the Yukon Delta coastline, and then that big area, the next storm, pushing eastward here into the central Aleutians, almost to Nikolsky and extending all the way back to Shimia. And for the afternoon on Monday, that continues to push eastward here, coming across the Fox Islands there, not quite to Falls Pass, and some IFR extending south of Nunivak Island in toward Kuskokwim Bay, but mainly off the coast here, right through the Bering Strait, and just grazing the western Arctic coast. VFR, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, all of the interior here until you get down to the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, southern Copper River Basin, especially over the mountains there, and the northern Panhandle over toward the border, staying on the IFR side throughout the day. And for passes tomorrow, Anaktuvik, IFR becoming marginal, same trend for Adigan, slow improvement throughout the day. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, we've got VFR to start with, becoming marginal as the clouds build in the afternoon. That same trend for rainy but windy, looking really good with VFR flying both approaches throughout the entire day. Isabel starting out marginal, becoming VFR, but Mentasta will be marginal the entire day Sunday. And for Tanita, looking VFR. And Portage starting out marginal, becoming VFR probably before noon. And Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR the entire day. Freezing levels 2,000 feet here, right over the northern Panhandle, about 4,000 feet down south. Really just about 4,000 feet here over much of the mainland part of the state here, with 2,000 feet up there toward the Brooks Range. Really a very flat gradient here on this chart, just 2 to maybe 4,000 feet, mostly 2,000 here at the Bering Sea, and then a little steeper there on that with, let's see, we're looking at 8,000 feet there, almost up to the western Aleutians. Icing, a lot of moisture sliding into the southwest Bering and along the Aleutians here. Icing increases throughout the day, getting as far east possibly as Atka in the late afternoon of the considerable moderate rime here in these shaded areas. Otherwise, pretty icing free, will be icing free here through all of interior Alaska, Kodiak Island, the entire west coast, and the northern and eastern Bering Sea. And then the bulk of the heavier icing looks like it'll stay south, although some of that could nudge on up across Dixon Entrance into the Metlakatla, Annette, maybe Ketchikan area. Otherwise, diminishing icing, but still a pretty good chance even up here over the northern areas, but really tapering off as you head west along the eastern North Gulf Coast. Jet stream, there was that upper low with a storm coming up affecting the Panhandle, but the main jet cutting in across the Queen Charlotte Islands there at about 100 knots, and some ridging, weak ridging out here over the central Aleutians. And then the next system there just off to the west. 9,000 feet ridging here, not too bad through the central Bering Sea slowly pushing eastward here, and the next system beginning to pick those winds up out of the south up to 30 knots, shimmying at 2. Otherwise, 15 to 20 here for the remainder of the Aleutians. Northwest, 20 to 30 across the Alaska Peninsula. The winds with this low center. And 3,000 feet, about the same pattern. Turbulence, pretty choppy over the Panhandle and along the Alaska Peninsula.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
The Space Weather Prediction Center has had a long-standing relationship with the power industry, so they've been aware that solar storms, the geomagnetic storm piece of that, can affect the operation of their systems and induce extra currents and loads on those systems that can either trip those systems offline or in the worst of cases, cause damage. That relationship goes back for several decades. In fact, a big incident in 1989 where part of Quebec was tripped offline that affected something like 6 million customers for about 9 hours. I think that really raised the awareness in the power industries.
When we get the alert, we watch the grid and start looking for issues. Are we seeing a decline in voltage? Are we seeing equipment failures? And we readjust the system to try to mitigate those problems, try to keep the lights on and keep it from going out.
Averaging about 500, 550 kilometers per second.
If we didn't have this early warning, we wouldn't see it until our sensor saw it. Getting more information quicker and faster before the storm hits, not during the storm, is a big improvement.
In the long term, I think what we need and what we're moving toward, the U.S. as a whole, is better modeling, fully understanding this phenomenon, understanding how it would impact specific systems.
Rather than actually experiencing a storm, we can simulate storms in our software and see what the impact is. We try to get ahead of it. We always plan that if there's an outage, how can we keep the lights on? What's the best process to prevent it?
In the end, 5-10 years from now, there's going to be a whole mix of operational procedures driven by what we do on prediction and warning. And then there also will probably be some level of hardware controls to ensure the reliability of the grid.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
There's different types of impacts on communication systems, and the HF we call the high frequency, which is that band of communications 3 to 30 megahertz. But it's a very important band of radio communication because it's used widespread. It's used, for example, by the airlines.
HF radio is most commonly used for position reporting when you're going across the ocean airspace, which is devoid of radar. And ATC can't see you, so it's up to you to report your position and your altitude and your speed.
HF works great most of the time, except during a big flare. And during a big flare, that HF communication capability could be gone within a minute or two. So as soon as we see something happening in there, or we see a flare, it's one of the first things we do is alert the aviation community, hey, big flare, HF's going to be impacted.
Once we know that there's an event going on, then the aviation industry and the airlines can react to that. They can alter their routes over the poles. They can lower the altitudes that they're flying at, or maybe decide not to fly at all in the interest of their passenger safety.
So that's just one example of how HF is used, but the emergency response community will use it a lot too. It's one of their primary backups.
When you've lost connectivity between certain government agencies, it gives you that long-range coverage to talk from out-of-state to federal governments or from the FEMA locations to the state emergency operations centers.
So if we've got a big hurricane impact in the coastline, whatever big city, we've got the cell towers down and whatnot, we've got emergency communication folks in there. Those folks are very familiar with space weather and how it impacts their systems.
Here in recent years, it was used during Katrina when we had a lot of communications outages down there. It was also used during Hurricane Ike. There was an outage of the telephone circuits with the Texas State Emergency Office, so it was used in both of those situations.
So when we talk about backup, especially for the airlines, typically they'll have SATCOM, so that'll be satellite communication.
The satellite technology that emergency responders use could be GPSs, could be satellite phones, satellite data terminals.
Space weather events can impact SATCOMs. The impact can range from a nuisance to loss of a spacecraft. So we will give them the heads up. If we have space weather events, flares, whatnot, they need to know what's impacting their systems. Situational awareness is key. Time is of essence to these folks. Again, it's life and death.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. Not a lot of difference from yesterday. Continuing to slowly melt here across the Chukchi Sea. Quite an area of sea ice-free waters now out in this zone, and back up toward Barrow. Then you get into the heavier stuff from around the central coast, of course, on out. And easterly flow going to continue for the next several days. Just about nothing left, even up here in Norton Bay. Not a lot of ice left or out there to the west. So Bering Sea essentially done with any ice conditions. And moving on to the coastal water forecast for tomorrow, still carrying gales on much of the southeast coast, except down south, 25 knots out of the south, becoming southerly to southeast, and then easterly, 35 up to the north. Lynn Canal, south 20 knots. Pretty windy day, Stevens Passage, central inside water areas, southeast 25, gusts 40 knots. Clarence Strait, southeast of 20 with 4-foot seas. And for Memorial Day, south to southwest, 25 knots on the south coast. East, as you go north here, coming, well, where Elephant Cove is in that area. I forgot the bay name, but east 25, and then swinging around to the north at 25 knots here. On the extreme north coast, south 20 again for Lynn Canal. And southeast 20, gusts 35, a little bit lighter, but not much change here for the Stevens Passage area. And Clarence Strait, southeast 25 now, so small craft advisories back in the picture there. Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, light winds northeast at 10. Seas 2 feet in the Sound, 6 to 7 feet there in the Gulf. Small craft advisories for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay, west winds 25, turn northwest. Across the Barrens, 7 to 8 foot seas. Light winds for Cook Inlet out of the northeast, probably becoming variable in the afternoon, especially the late afternoon. And then swinging around to the south and southwest here, 15 to 20 knots, northern Cook Inlet, all the way down into Kamishak Bay. Seas roughly 5 feet south of the Forelands and 4 feet to the north. Winds come down to 15 knots out of the west there for the Barren Islands, with seas subsiding to 5 feet. And light wind day in store for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, here for Memorial Day with 10-knot winds. That's about it. Slight seas in the Sound, and 5 to 7 foot seas here for the North Gulf Coast. Kodiak Island, strongest winds there on the east side, west 30 knots sustained, 8 foot seas, 25 for Shelikof Strait. Northwest 25, small craft advisories for Bristol Bay, Sitkinak to Castle Cape, northwest 30, gusts 40 knots. So that stronger wind slowly shifting eastward, and then coming down here 20 to 25 out of the northwest for the Alaska Peninsula. And then for Monday, those swing around to the south, come up to 25 to 30 knots, 5 to 9 foot seas. Lighter winds for Bristol Bay, southwest 15, and also here southwest of Sitkinak, southwest 20 knots, right up the east side of Kodiak Island and Shelikof Strait. seas running 5 to 6 feet. And out over the western Aleutians, south 20 here for the Sunday forecast for the far western zones, about 25 out of the southeast turn southerly. Small craft advisory level winds for Adak and Atka. Falling back as you head east here, down to 15 knots out of the west across Unalaska Island with seas down to 4 feet. And then for Monday, gales here for the eastern Aleutians, most areas, with 35 knot winds south to southwest, west-southwest 20-25, central Aleutians, and then 25 to 30 knot winds out west, the next system pushing in for the far western Aleutians. And for the Pribilofs to St. Matthew Island, light southeast winds at 10, northwest 20 here south of Nunivak Island, only 10 knots on the north side, west-northwest 15, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound. Outlook for Monday, west 10, Norton Sound, east 15, St. Lawrence Island. Small craft advisories, southwest coast, southeast 25, and 30 knot winds for the Pribilofs, as well as St. Matthew Island. Central, eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, east winds 20 knots. And then small craft advisories, east 25 here with 6-foot seas for the western zones. Then 20 knots out of the east from Cape Beaufort, turning west here across the Chukchi Sea at 10 knots. And then that's really gets light on Monday here all the way up to Cape Beaufort out of the southeast 15 for the remainder of the Arctic coast. And for tonight, isolated thunderstorms this evening dissipating, just isolated scattered showers through the interior, especially the Copper River Basin. Rain and wind diminish, but hold over the northern areas here, the panhandle of that system, which weakens, showers, less wind, less rain tomorrow, that's for sure. Panhandle, scattered thunderstorms, south central Alaska. Some areas seeing some sun, and the next front pushing to the eastern Aleutians. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.